HelloFresh takes the guesswork and the extra hassle out of planning and preparing delicious meals for dinner. America's #1 meal kit, HelloFresh gives you over 40 recipes to choose from each week. And then your farm-fresh, pre-portioned seasonal ingredients arrive at your doorstep with simple instructions to help you feel like the master chef of your kitchen. And did you know that HelloFresh is cheaper than grocery shopping and 25% less expensive than takeout? HelloFresh has been an awesome addition to our household's dinner routine. We all get involved and cook together, following the pictured step-by-step instructions. It's a fun quality time and the meals are delicious. Give it a try and see for yourself. Go to HelloFresh.com/50havingitall and use code 50havingitall for 50% off plus free shipping. Again, to get 50% off plus free shipping, go to HelloFresh.com/50havingitall and use code 50havingitall.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Welcome to the Having It All podcast, the show about what it takes to live an abundant, loving life. My name is Matthew Bivens, and each week I'm helping you get out of your head so that you can truly have it all. Let's do it. What's going on, everybody? Matthew Bivens here, and welcome to the Having It All podcast. Today's episode is a rebroadcast of a fantastic conversation that I had with Heather Gray. Heather's business and website are called Choose to Have It All, so you can probably see why I wanted to have her on the podcast. The reason why I love this episode and why I wanted to republish it for you is because the themes in this conversation are always relevant. We are talking about choice. We're talking about the fact that each of us can choose to experience life with love and abundance. Now, we do not always get to choose what happens to us in life, but we absolutely get to choose how we respond to it. And that's something that I personally am constantly reminding myself of, especially when circumstances are hitting me and the stuff is hitting the fan. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this episode. It is amazing. Heather is awesome, and we really connect powerfully. Before we jump into it, I do want to say if you have a spare second, I would really love for you to hop over to iTunes and leave me a rating. It really just takes a couple of seconds and a few clicks, and it will help this show to reach new ears. So again, if you have a second, hop over to iTunes, leave a rating. I appreciate it. And with that, let's jump into the episode.
My guest today is Heather Gray. Heather is an executive coach working with entrepreneurs and business leaders who have achieved that external success. You know, the great career, the fat bank account, all the titles behind their name. But that success has come at the expense of their internal well-being. So what Heather does is she helps them have the lifestyle and the wealth that they want, but also the personal fulfillment that they truly desire. Now, what's cool is that Heather's business and website have a very familiar sounding name, which we'll get into in a second. And so with that, I am very excited to be chatting with Heather on this episode. Heather, how are you being today?
Oh, I'm so good. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome. Thank you for joining me and hanging out for a little bit. And so I teased the name of your website in the intro, but can you share it with us now?
Sure. I built my life, my passion, and my business around the idea of letting people know that they can have happiness in the life they want. They just have to choose it. So I called my business choosetohaveitall.com.
Boom. I think that is so cool. And it is very obvious that, you know, why you and I wanted to connect. Your website is called Choose to Have It All, and this podcast is called Having It All. So you and I are speaking on some similar things, I imagine.
Yes, absolutely. And I think too, it's so important for people to recognize that it's possible for them, but that they have a role in that. And I think sometimes people think that having it all is just for the lucky rather than a sort of an action response to the things that they've done.
So what does having it all mean to you?
I think for me, having it all is a sense of well being and balance across a couple of areas in my life. That personally, I'm feeling fulfilled in my relationships. Professionally, I'm feeling fulfilled, but I'm also living up to my potential. I think sometimes in my work life, that hasn't always been true. And so I've never felt totally complete professionally because I always felt like maybe I was holding my potential back. And then I also think there's this internal sense of not only my relationships with other people, but the third part is that my relationship with myself is good. Like I'm good with me and I can just do me and be good with that and where I'm at, in addition to knowing what I'm working on next.
Oh, that's powerful. I love that you brought in that relationship to self. Yeah, I think it's key, and I've talked about it on the show. And it's just, I think it starts there. I believe that what you can, the extent to which you can love yourself is the extent to which you can love other people.
I also think too that it's about accepting yourself and your limitations a little bit too, right? It's not just like, oh, I accept this, I accept that, but also too, like for me, I know, for example, I'm a natural crier. Like I'm going to be the person who cries at a Hallmark commercial. I'm going to be the person who cries every holiday, thinking about the people who've passed away in the years before that I'm never going to share another holiday table with. And I can either get mad at myself and be like, wow, you're such an emotional mess, or hey, I'm a natural born crier and that comes with the picture.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That acceptance is so huge. So huge. So how did you get into this type of work? Did you go to school for this stuff, or did
I Yeah, it's actually been a bit of a long road. I started my clinical training is as a clinical social worker, and I kind of, since I was 21 or so, I had always said that I was going to go into program management in residential treatment facilities, which are like homes and programs for adolescent girls and boys who struggle in the community. They can't get it right at home. Usually their stories come with tons of trauma, tons of trials and tribulations. And I had gone into program management thinking that that's really what I wanted to do. And I did that for about 10 years until I hit burnout. And then that's when I made a move to kind of working one-on-one with adults on their own personal development, achievements, and life goals.
Now, why the topic? Why work with people on personal development?
I think it's because having worked with so much with trauma and working with so much with kids who awful things had happened to, one of the things that I ended up learning about is that the kids who kind of made it, the kids who showed resilience, were the kids who decided this isn't how my story's going to end. It doesn't end here. I'm going to learn what I need to learn. I'm going to learn how to act better. I'm going to learn how to talk better. And so what I really kind of came to is that I think there was a lot of, in the clinical movement and in the private practice mental health movement, it's, oh, you're depressed. Oh, you've been traumatized. Oh, this awful thing has happened to you. And my perspective has never been life happens to you. It's life happens to everyone. So what are you going to do about it? And I had to say that to an 8-year-old girl and a 14-year-old boy. And at some point, I think we stopped telling that to adults. And I was kind of the rogue therapist for a while in private practice before I moved into online coaching, saying, okay, all these awful things happen to you, but what are you going to do about it here? Because you still have choices. And that passion and that belief that you can build a life regardless of what's happened to you has just kind of gotten stronger and more clear and more centered for me the longer I've been talking to people.
That's awesome. That's so big. I think when it comes to choosing to have it all, is understanding that life serves you up circumstances and you get to choose how you want to respond to them. And it's so powerful.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I don't think that people sort of say that often enough, because I think what ends up happening, and it's funny because you kind of have to find your tribe, right? You have to find the people who believe in this and who agree with you, because if they don't agree with you on it, they're never going to change in the first place. But it's this idea of like, as soon as you buy into this message, no matter what the heck has happened to you, you're not a victim anymore. You have a choice in like what you can do next, and you can survive way more easily when you're the one who's decided this isn't how my story ends. I don't like where I'm at right now, so I'm going to pivot. I think that's where that awareness is where I've seen the most lives have the most change.
Yeah, that victim stuff is real. It's like I feel like just it's reinforced in a lot of things that we see on in today in the media and things like that. The concept of somebody being a victim or being the abused or abuser.
Absolutely. And you run the risk if you're sort of being the one who's saying, so what are you going to do about this? Okay, you fell on the sidewalk. Are you going to get back up? I think sometimes those questions get seen as callous, as insensitive and invalidating. But that's not really what it's about. It's, hey, you fell on the sidewalk, but hey, I'm right here. Here's my hand. Take my hand. We'll get up. We'll walk together. We just saw it this week in the Olympics. I don't know if you caught that clip of the two women in one of the 100-mile dashes or something, and they fell on top of each other, and they both picked each other up and kept going. They didn't stay down. And I think that so much about having it all is validating the fall. And I think sometimes people forget that part, that nobody in the story right now is saying, well, crap, these girls lost out on their medal. That sucks. And I think that in life, we have to do that part. We have to say, oh, God, man, you fell. I'm so sorry. That's so hard. You really worked hard and you didn't get where you wanted. But once you do that part, the having it all part is, let's get back up and figure it out. And they did. And now they've inspired so many people in that moment of getting back up.
Yeah, I totally remember that moment. And it's definitely, it's one of those Olympic moments that stands out, but it's great that you can connect it to a bigger message. And when you were talking, you made me think of a personal example that I'm going to bring up. And actually, I'm going to ask you a question. And this is personal to me and a circumstance that I'm right now experiencing with my family, specifically with my youngest sister. We had a conversation 2 days ago about this. So what would you say to somebody who feels as if they are victim to life? Life happened to them. And in order for them to feel supported, they wanted the other people to enroll in that victim mentality with them. That's how they would feel supported. How would you handle or approach that situation?
I think the first step I do is I say, hey, I know you want to rescue right now. I know your story is that this has happened and you've been through this and you shouldn't have to fight anymore. That's getting through it and still living and still surviving, that you did your business. And now it's someone else's turn to hold your hand and drag you through life. And I know you want that, and that makes sense to me. But if I give you that, all I'm doing is making you dependent on me, and you're not building your life. You're just building an additional crutch that you need to get through life. And so if you fall again, you're there again. And I don't want that for you. I don't want you to be down on the ground falling, because the next time you fall, if I don't rescue you right now, you're going to know how to get back up.
Wow. I don't have much to say because I'm gonna encourage my family to listen to that portion, because that whole concept of feeling like someone needs to be rescued. I mean, I've been there. I've hit my head on the concrete and then wanted somebody to pick me up, dust me off, patch me up, and make sure that I didn't do it again. And then when I did do it again, I looked to them and like, where are you? You didn't come and rescue me a second time.
HelloFresh takes the guesswork and the extra hassle out of planning and preparing delicious meals for dinner. America's #1 meal kit, HelloFresh gives you over 40 recipes to choose from each week. And then your farm-fresh, pre-portioned seasonal ingredients arrive at your doorstep with simple instructions to help you feel like the master chef of your kitchen. And did you know that HelloFresh is cheaper than grocery shopping and 25% less expensive than takeout? HelloFresh has been an awesome addition to our household's dinner routine. We all get involved and cook together, following the pictured step-by-step instructions. It's a fun quality time, and the meals are delicious. Give it a try and see for yourself. Go to HelloFresh.com/50havingitall and use code 50havingitall for 50% off plus free shipping. Again, to get 50% off plus free shipping, go to HelloFresh.com/50havingitall and use code 50havingitall.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
And then you're constantly longing and yearning and searching, and you're in this like empty hole place of scarcity mentality where I'm not going to get my needs met because I need other people. If you can kind of tune into your capability and what it is that you know and what you've learned, and then you get back up, you did that your damn self. And then like you've got that in your back pocket. You know, one of the things that I always kind of go to is that professionally, I've always been pretty good. I don't pretend to take that for granted, that I have a talent with words. I have a talent with communicating. And I know that that kind of thing comes easy for me. I was the one who got A's in high school in psychology and English, and I got the C's in biology and math. I've known that since the beginning of time. But when I get scared and when I get anxious, I remember the night in a residential treatment center when it felt like there were more kids than adults, and there were more kids acting out than adults, and they rioted on us, and it was super scary. And I had to lead that situation and manage adults and manage the other scared kids. That happened, Matthew, that must have happened like at this point in my career, it must have happened 12 years ago. I still go, hey, that was my worst night ever. It's not that bad right now.
Wow.
And I lean on it.
Wow, that's powerful. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like if you made it through that, you can make it through the next, challenge that you come up against.
And I don't think people use their challenges that way. Life happens to all of us. It sucks for all of us. And at times, not all the time, some people were dealt like heavier cards in life than some other people. But at some point in time, we're all challenged. And I think sometimes once a challenge happens and we've survived it or we've gotten over it, we go, whew, never again. And they don't recognize that that thing you just survived is now your biggest skill set in your toolbox. You now know how to get through the thing that 2 weeks ago you didn't know how to get through.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I've experienced personally is that, I'm big on my own personal development and on my own journey for healing and for growth. And what I found is that life will serve up something for me, and it'll look like the biggest mountain I've ever had to climb, and it looks impossible. And then I climb it, and then I have that experience, like you said, where I'm like, whew, I made it. And then life serves up an even bigger one. It's like, okay, you're playing this big game, this big growth and healing game. So it just keeps serving up bigger and bigger mountains, and being able to look back and be like, you know what, I scaled that mountain before that I thought was impossible. I can scale this one. That for me has been a huge tool to have in my pocket.
Absolutely. And I would just add one more thing to that in between mountains, it's okay to look at the next one and go, are you kidding me again?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when people like us send the message to people like your family of like, come on, like this isn't like we're not in our past anymore. This isn't still happening to us. We can get past this. And you like you're sending that message of positivity. They don't hear that validation. But if you go, and it's not fair that you have to do it again and you don't want to do it again, but not wanting to do it again doesn't mean you can't do it again. I still think you have to embrace the suck a little bit. I heard that on a podcast with Michael O'Neill the other day. And it's this idea that like at some point in time, you have to embrace the suck. And I think that that's how we connect to people who don't necessarily instinctively think like us.
Yeah, and I know for me, sometimes I've come across as lacking empathy, and so
Yes.
being able to embrace that suck is huge. It's huge.
You just don't live there, right? Like you say, yeah, this sucks, but we're getting up now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a bit about some of the challenges that your current coaching clients come to you with, the people who have the success
Sure.
on paper, but are feeling like they're lacking something inside.
I think that one of the kind of to put a frame on all of this is I think I was raised with this belief too, that if you climb the ladder, whatever ladder you're on, and you can be a blue collar worker wanting to own your own shop, or you can want to be a CEO. I've worked with a lot of people in different professionals, but it's sort of this message is if you just do what you need to do, if you just hustle, you get to the top. That's having it all. And a lot of times what I find is I'm working with these senior managers, mid managers, or CEOs of companies or solopreneurs who are owning their own business and kind of doing things like I'm doing. They get that and they get to that final rung, but then they suddenly are hearing from their spouses like, you're never home, or they're hearing from their kids like, why are you coming to this basketball game? You never went to any of my others in the past 2 years. So they find that their relationships are struggling. That's probably, I'd say, 70% of what like attributes to people figuring out that they're not happy, is that a relationship in their life is sort of in crisis, or they're not in a relationship because all they've done is build their life and they don't have it. So they get to that top rung of the ladder, they have a glass of champagne and they're looking left and right and there's nobody to celebrate with. I've certainly gotten my fair share of calls around that. But the main thing is people think that the success will equivalent to a successful relationship, and it just doesn't even out that way.
It's like that. It's something we've all heard so many times, right? That if you place your happiness on things externally, you're going to be left feeling disappointed. And we've read it for most of our professional careers, I imagine. I mean, the people that you coach, they are intelligent people. Like, they've heard this stuff before. Why do you think it is that people just have to experience it, as opposed to saying, you know what, I remember reading that blog article where someone said, make sure that you are, creating your happiness internally so that you can deal with anything. Like, why doesn't that message just sink in?
Matthew, it's my story that they're not reading those articles.
Really?
It's my story that they're so focused on work because they're told that if you're successful, you have it all. So they're reading the articles on how to interview more effectively and in less time. They're reading the articles on how to get that next promotion, how to negotiate your salary, how to nail that lead, how to make a cold call. And their story is that by being successful, people will like them. And that's what's good. That's their selling point, that it's not about who they are personally. It's about, if I'm successful, that's why people will want to be around me, because people want to be around successful people.
Okay. So you're saying that they may not even be aware of that other conversation.
Not at all. Now, that's more often than not, that's what the first conversation I'm having with people is to sort of say, are you aware, like, so your wife or your husband has come to you and sort of said, I'm not happy in this marriage. And you're turning around and saying, well, what do you mean? I just took you to Malibu and you don't like that BMW that's sitting in the driveway. What are you talking about? You're not happy. And the first question I say is, if I were to ask you what your partner needs, what are the 3 emotional needs they need on a regular and consistent basis in order to feel seen and taken care of by you? It's dead air nearly every single time, because they've checked off the list of, I've brought in the money, they have the nice car, they can go on vacation, we got our kid a special, premium membership to a special summer camp this summer. What more do they want? And I think that the problem is they haven't learned that there's value in being present. because in their professional life, that doesn't equal dollars. So what's the point? So they don't equate in their personal lives that just showing up on time for dinner, asking how your day was, listening, and then asking a follow-up question has any value, because nobody cares about that when you're at work.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Or at least that's not something that's measured at work, you know.
No,
It's-
or
yeah.
appreciated.
Yeah, or
Absolutely.
appreciated. You know, it is interesting though, as you said that, it reminded me of my own experience. My parents got divorced when I was about 10 years old, and I lived with my mom, and we would see my dad, you know, like the typical arrangement. Every other weekend, he would have us. And I remember for years growing up that one of the ways my dad showed his love for us was by purchasing us things. So when we would go to his house, we'd have the new video game, or you know, he would take us out to dinner, and he would spend his money on us, and he would show us that's how he loved us. And it wasn't until years later, when I was, you know, had grown up a little bit, and I had really reflected on those things, that I shared with him that all I wanted was your time. I didn't want the things; I just wanted your time. And you know, he was maybe 60 years old when the first time he heard that, and the first time it sunk in. So I get what you're saying, where people just, they aren't having that conversation about, you know, what truly is important.
And I think that so much of it is because they spend so much time developing their professional lives, they don't develop their personal sort of sense of self and personality and who they are and who they bring to a relationship. So they don't know that. They think their value is in what they can provide. And that it's like eye-opening, like, really? You want to spend time with me? And it's almost like shocking, because they don't see themselves as valuable. They don't hold themselves in that kind of esteem as somebody that somebody else would want to spend time with.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. Yeah, you know, the self-value piece, like, are they worthy of somebody else's love?
I used to hate that stupid expression that nobody can love you until you love yourselves. You know, I used to think that was like a victim stance, and like all you're doing is blaming the victim. Like, wow, you've been traumatized, and now you have to love yourself because you've been traumatized in order for anybody else to love you. And I used to kind of get on my high horse about that. But the more I live in this world and have these conversations with people, that it really is, you have to know that you're valuable to other people in order to like be able to be present for other people. Because if you don't think you have anything to offer, you're creating a ton of other stories that make no sense and make it really hard for you to connect to the other person.
I like how you keep bringing up the word story, because that resonates with me. I get that. You know, the stories that we make, that we create, we then just play on repeat in our heads, and then that becomes our reality. So I'm happy you bring that up, because I think for the people listening, it's something that they can grasp onto. Like, what story am I creating that is resulting in this experience I'm having right now?
Absolutely. And the way I kind of explain it to people is when someone says something, does something, or doesn't say and doesn't do something, we create a story about it. So for example, if you know, like you make a nice dinner for your wife and she doesn't say thank you, you can create a story about that she didn't even notice the extra effort. She doesn't really care. When in fact, she might have just been so grateful to have that dinner taken off her list and to be able to get 10 seconds of relaxation, that she went and took those 10 seconds of relaxation rather than having that conscious moment of thanking you. It doesn't mean she's ungrateful. She might have just forgotten to say it.
Ah, very true. So true. And, you know, I know for me, my ego kicks in real quick if I extend myself, or if I make myself vulnerable and I don't get the response, or I don't get the action back that I was expecting. Like, it's so easy for that story to just start to be created right then.
I absolutely. I think that the same is true for me. I find it too sometimes that the way it translates for me is because I tend to be thoughtful and because I tend to be insightful. When people aren't thoughtful towards me, or when they don't seem to know or understand me, my story is why is it that I'm always doing more for other people than they're doing for me? When in actuality, when I have those really kind of raw personal conversations with people, people, it's not that they're not thinking of doing anything for me. It's not that they're selfish. It's that they think I've got it because I present as so confident and capable, that the story I'm sending out to them is, I don't like, almost, I don't need you. I've got it. That part of getting my needs met in relationships means I have to be vulnerable and say out loud I have them, rather than expecting other people to read my mind and know that.
Yeah, that communication piece and just being bold enough to say what you want and sort of releasing what happens after that.
Every single time. It's, anytime there's a conflict in a relationship, the first thing I tell people and the first thing I try to teach people is tell the person what you want them to think. Because so often we don't say something because we're worried about how it's going to be taken, or we don't quite know how to say it. But if you just simply say out loud, hey, I did this nice thing for you. I kind of like, I'd hope that you would have acknowledged it or said thank you. And my feelings are hurt that you didn't. That opens up the dialogue for somebody to say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. My head was in 50 million different places. But you have to tell the person what you want them to think and say it out loud before any of that gets worked out.
So I noticed that when I was looking at your site, like a lot of your content, your blog content, at least what I was seeing, was about relationships and just kind of like what you described. So what has been your history with the primary relationships in your life, in your past? Because it seems like that is something that comes out, right now for you.
Sure. I'm married. My husband's name is Damon, and we've been together since 2003, and we got married in 2009. And he's certainly my primary relationship, and he's my primary support. We've been through a lot together. He suffered a spinal cord injury 2 years into our relationship. So he was, at the time when I met him, he was quite active and able to walk, run, and do a bunch of other things. And he was in an accident, suffered a spinal cord injury, and now he requires a wheelchair. So life handed us a huge challenge. And now we're going back like 10 years ago. So it doesn't feel so recent anymore. But that's certainly been like the cornerstone of how I've learned to navigate relationships and to make them more real and understandable for people. I'm close to my sister and my parents as well. And I have a small core group of friends that I really heavily rely on as well.
Yeah, so relationships are big for you.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I think they're big for a lot of people. I feel like if our relationships are good, we're good. When relationships are in crisis, it's just kind of distracting. I always tell people work can be good so long and you can have a hard time in your personal life. But if your personal life and work are in conflict at the same time, that's when it gets bubbly. But yeah, I think that people really find that whatever level of relationships they want, because I certainly know a lot of these people who call me, they're not looking for like a long-term committed relationship. That a romantic relationship or marriage isn't necessarily considered something their cornerstone in their own lives, but they want to be good with people and have people be good with them. Nobody wants to be an island at the end of the day. However close they want to be to other people, that's usually personal preference.
Oh, that's powerful. So getting back to your coaching, I'm curious. I feel like some of the best coaches are the people who've been there. Like they've been there, they've done that, and they can steer their clients past landmines. So I'm curious, what makes you qualified to coach people on choosing happiness and to coach people on having it all?
I think it's a fair question, and I'm really glad you asked it, because I think in this land of like online coaches, we can just sort of assume, oh, everybody's a coach, everybody's doing it, and I absolutely bring the chops. On a couple of levels, clinically, I've done my time and I have the experience to mark off. But when I mentioned earlier that I started residential with the hope of working in management, I decided that when I was sitting on top of a jungle gym when I was 21 years old, working with a kid who was refusing refusing to get down, getting him off the jungle gym and doing what he was supposed to do. And I kind of thought I was always going to be a program manager. I worked my way up a ladder in that residential program for 10 years, and I got to the top of the ladder and I hated it. And nobody prepared me for that. Nobody said, hey, when you decide what you want to be when you grow up, you're going to get to the top and you might find out you're wrong. And it was soul crushing, because I'd worked so hard and I had so confidently decided at the cocky age of 21 that I knew what I wanted, and that like my life was set. And I had to pivot 2 years. I worked 10 years, getting to the top. I became a program manager and I tried to give it my all for 2 years, and it just didn't make me happy. And I had to pivot. And that's when I started a brick and mortar private practice. And I really loved being my own boss. I loved being in control of my schedule. I loved the switch that happened when I was in private practice from working with people who were mandated by other people to see me to people who could just knock on my door when they were ready to see me and wanted to see me. So professionally, that's kind of how that happened. But also personally, like I mentioned it, earlier, I was 2 years into my relationship with my boyfriend when he was hurt and suffered a spinal cord injury. And I had to re-choose whether or not I still wanted a life with him, whether or not I wanted a life as, the partner of somebody in a wheelchair living with disability, whether or not I wanted that part of my life, because I couldn't just say, oh, I'm dating this person, he suffered this injury, now this has happened to me. I had to re-choose it. I had to say, no, okay, life happened, but this is my life right now. And yes, I still want it. And I think those moments of introspection are so scary for people. And I certainly remember being scared several times on this journey, but having gotten to the other side and making the decisions I needed to make to have the life I've wanted, I'd do it all over again.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It is one of those great things when you are faced with that fear, when you're faced with that thing that makes you incredibly uncomfortable and you move through it. You can look back on that journey, whether it was something that happened in a day or a week or 10 years and be like, man, it was all worth it. It was all so worth it.
Well, without it, I wouldn't have become the person I am right now. And I think sometimes that's the other part of self-acceptance, is that like you have to like yourself, you have to like your life. But at some point in time, what's that like elevator summary you're going to make about like why something had to happen or what you learned from it? What's the takeaway? And I think sometimes people are so afraid to look at that takeaway. But when I realized that I had spent 10 years working at a job that ultimately wasn't going to be what I wanted to be when I grew up, it was the worst breakup ever. But then recently, when I wanted to sort of be bolder and dream bigger and reach more people by creating an online business instead of a brick and mortar private practice, suddenly it was like I was able to remember, well, you've done this before. Like you pivoted, you made a switch and it turned out great for a while. Maybe this new gig of yours and this new dream will turn out equally great.
Yeah, you're able to look at that experience and, you tucked it away in your pocket and you could pull it back out and say, yeah, I've done it before, or I've done something that at the time felt like, the hardest challenge in my life.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned when you were going through that, your professional journey, the 10 years to get to the top of your ladder, you get to the top, you realize it wasn't what you wanted. You realize that it just did not align, but you kind of grunted it out for 2 years. What sort of things bubbled up for you? What bubbled up in terms of conflicts in other areas of your life because your career and, you following your passion or your dream was out of alignment?
Well, the first way I figured it out is I was crying every Sunday night before I had to go to work.
Wow.
It didn't sit well with my soul anymore, so to speak. I think it was hard for my husband at the time to be supportive of me going in day and day out. when I wasn't happy. And I think that we all create this loop, and I'm sure your listeners and you might even resonate with this too. Like, so I'd be crying on a Sunday before going to work, and then I'd have some awesome kid moment on a Wednesday, and I'd be like, oh, that's why I'm here. Like, of course I need to stay. And then on Friday, I was so thankful the week was over and it was a weekend, and I was in a good mood because I'd have 2 days off. And then on Sunday night, the Sunday blues would hit, and I'd be in it again. And when you do that enough, you just realize something needs to change. Now, the funny part of that is my job was so stressful and kind of ridiculous and crazy that there was no way I was going to figure out what I really wanted. So the only reason why I even ended up in private practice is because I had the clinical license in Massachusetts that made it so I could do that, so I could put up a shingle. And my intention was, I'm just going to do this for now, and then I'm going to figure it out. And I had no idea how much I was going to love being my own boss. And I think so many times, like, that's another lesson I've learned in how do you make these choices, is that you don't have to know the forever step. And that's the difference between the job I was in when I was in residential and where I'm at now, is I'm just looking at what's next, not what's forever, and I can pivot at any time. And I think that's a way people can choose to have it all, when they're not putting this pressure on themselves to know the final answer and the end goal, when they're 30, when they're 35, when they're 55. This is just what's next. This is what I want right now. And that's the huge takeaway.
Wow. So in your story, getting to that point, like what was it that basically the straw that broke the camel's back between the 2 years at that career and then you moving into your private practice? Was it a gradual transition, or was it like, okay, I can't do this anymore, I'm leaving?
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void were prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void were prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
It's funny. I have a dear girlfriend, and when she and I were, we were young, early 20s, we used to sit and have these like long conversations after work. And our work was like second shift, so we'd get out at like 11 o'clock at night. And we developed this sort of mantra, is you'll know when you know, and you can analyze it forever. You can go into analysis paralysis, but at some point in time, you'll just know. Yeah. And I was leading the program at the time. I was going through that cycle of Sunday blues, Wednesday it's okay, Friday weekend. And I just had a moment where I was in a position where I wanted to do a family event. And I suddenly was like, oh, I've already juggled the on-call schedule twice. I can't ask somebody to cover my call again. I don't think I'm going to be able to go. And I decided, I think in that moment, I need to change.
Yeah. Wow. And how did you muster the courage to make that change? Because I know that there is someone listening who's in that position right now. Like, they feel all the factors are there, all the reasons it does, their career, whatever it is, maybe it's their relationship, it doesn't align with who they are and what they're about, but they're just missing that little bit of courage to get over the hump.
The first thing I did is I cried my eyes out. And I grieved it. And I think I gave myself permission to be wrong, and I gave myself permission to start new. And I think that I told myself that I have a choice. I can be unhappy crying about a job I don't like, or I can be unhappy because I'm scared that I don't know what's next. I have to choose my unhappy. One has no endpoint. I'm unhappy at this job. It looks like I'm going to stay unhappy at this job. The next one is, well, I'm unhappy because I'm scared and I'm nervous and I'm doubting myself and I don't really know how to run my own business. I've never done it before. But that has an end date at some point because I can learn. Or if I'm wrong, I'll just be out of the residential long enough to be able to get a new job.
That's an amazing, I think, shift in how to view that situation.
You have to choose your unhappy sometimes, I think, too. Like, I had to not only choose happiness, but sometimes you just have to choose your pile of suck, which sucks less.
Yeah. I mean, and that's real, right? Because sometimes all you can see is the pile of suck. You're just so in it. You're like, I can't see anything else. Like, this pile sucks, that pile sucks, this one sucks even more. And so,
yeah,
it's...
And where am I, what's going to get me out of this the fastest? But the whole time it has to be this awareness that, like, I can get myself out of this. And I think that, when you talk about how'd you get here, I think one of the things I probably don't give myself enough credit for, or I don't really pay attention to very often, because I don't really identify with it as part of my core story. I think a lot of times my core story has been about, like, leaving the residential job after recognizing it wasn't what I wanted to be when I grew up, and having a relationship with someone who has a spinal cord injury. But my mom died when I was 6 years old. I was born with a cleft palate, and I was kind of the sick kid who always, I got viral spinal meningitis when I was a young kid. And half of that, I remember my mom dying, of course, but I don't remember being sick, and I don't really remember the cleft palate operations. But I think by the time I was in college, I'd already survived a lot. I'd already done a lot of life, and I was still standing, and I still had talents and things that I was good at. And I think sometimes when, I'm just thinking as you asked me this, that I probably don't give that foundation enough credit in terms of how did I come out fighting? And I'm sure that's part of it.
Well, what's cool about that moment, the moment that we just had, was that you're somebody who I believe is very introspective, who's done a lot of deep diving internally. And the fact that even you have things in your past that are part of a story that you weren't recognizing is powerful for people to hear, because I think that, it might be easy for someone to look at you or someone to look at me hosting this podcast and be like, oh, well, they talk the talk, so they must walk the walk all the time. But you're sharing that, you even overlook things at times.
Absolutely. I didn't even know until, I guess maybe the past 5 years or so ago, how introverted I am. That I'm somebody who gets my energy by being alone. I don't think that I've always known that I've liked alone time. I've always known that, like, I was the person who never had an issue going to a movie by myself. I lived alone before my relationship for like 8 years. I think I was living alone. And I loved every second of it. And there's this part of me that could still, like, if, I had my truest wish, have a secret apartment somewhere that I could go and escape to whenever I wanted, even though I'm, happily married. Nobody ever gave me words for that. And then a couple of years ago, I read Susan Cain's book on quiet, and learned more about people who are introverts. And I had like a collection of those qualities that I knew about myself, but I had never had like a word for it where I was like, wow, I'm introverted, because I'm not shy. I'm sitting here having this conversation with you, and it's lighting me up, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm in my zone, and I'm having a lot of fun talking to you. But I never realized that in order to be this animated and tuned into my passion, I also need downtime and time by myself. It's only been the past couple of years that I've realized I can't be lit up unless I've also had some downtime by myself.
It's so important to know what you need to recharge, to be aware, like, oh man, I'm feeling a little bit depleted. I need to do X, Y, and Z, because I know that's what helps me to get back up. And what I also want to put an asterisk on that, like, it's a healthy thing that you're doing. It's not, I need to go turn to this drink or I need to go turn to this substance. What you're referring to is something healthy.
Yes. Absolutely. But the thing is, Matthew, that's the part where people don't always understand that part. So when I tell somebody that like, oh, yes, I'm technically free on Friday, I can technically do lunch with you, but I don't want to meet you for, a little bit of day drinking in the middle of the day. I'd actually prefer to be by myself. That's where it gets tricky. It affects relationships. And I think sometimes that conflict with our needs and how they impact our friendships, our personal relationships, or relationships with family, I think that's a lot of the reasons why people stop tuning into their needs, because their needs create conflict for other people.
What's interesting about you saying that is I agree, 100% agree. But what I think is interesting is if you're in a relationship and you don't take your needs into account, on a Monday, on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday, at some point it's going to come up to the surface. At some point it's going to be a huge conflict, the fact that you haven't been taking your needs into account. And I
absolutely. And I think that's how it happens for people, that they end up in these relationships and they're suddenly in conflict, and that's when they realize needs aren't getting met, because they've denied that they needed it. I worked recently with a man who was really into, I always like laugh about this, but I don't know if you know about like the Pan Mass Challenge, the huge bike ride that's like a fundraiser on the East Coast. I don't even know how many days it goes on, but every year somebody ends up in my office because of that stupid bike challenge, because people don't know how to talk about why that's really important to them, why exercise really matters, why gym time or training time or rock climbing time, CrossFit time, like, fill in the blank there, is important to them, and their spouse doesn't understand. So they just back off and they say, I don't need to do that bike race. I'll just send in my check. That's good enough to support these people. It doesn't have to be me. But then a year and a half later, they're unhappy in the relationship and they haven't made the connection that it's because like, wow, bike riding used to be really important to you. You used to be a racer. You used to light up bike riding, but because you didn't want to have the fight, you stopped saying it out loud. And now here you are at the top of the ladder where you have 8 weeks paid vacation every year and you don't know what the heck to do with yourself because you gave up bike riding so long ago you forgot it's a thing you like.
Oof. Yeah. Yeah, it's so important to honor yourself and your things that you want to experience and the things that you feel you need.
And to be able to say it out loud rather than giving it away.
Yeah. Yeah. Oof. Well, I'm looking at the time, and I want to ask you a question. Are you comfortable with going over a couple extra minutes? Because there's something I wanted to ask you, and it'll go past the 40-minute mark.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right, awesome. So getting back on you and your introspection and your ability to deep dive, I've talked on this show about something called an epic challenge, and it's come up in a number of episodes. And essentially, an epic challenge is an area in your life where you currently feel stuck. You feel stuck. You're not getting the results that you want. You're not having the understanding that you want. And it can be in any type of area of your life. It can be in love and relationships or career or friendships or wherever. So my question for you is what is your current epic challenge? And I challenge you to go deep on it and to share with us something that, really is that it's big. And it's something that is hitting you at the core right now.
Yeah, it's actually not hard to dig deep because it's been bothering me for a while, but I feel like I've been a really lousy friend to people who are important to me. Last year, my husband had a tough time. He was sick for about 8 months last year, and I had friends who were so present and they were checking in with me every day and they were bringing by food and making sure I got my needs met. And this year he's better, and I'm so excited that he and I are doing really well and my business is doing really well. Last week we were on vacation. We got to go to New York City and we ate our way through New York City. But the week before vacation, I was kind of hustling, right? I was trying to get all my bases covered before vacation. And I had a friend sort of message me kind of tentatively and let me know she was having a hard time. And I didn't respond. It almost in the moment I got that message and it felt like I don't have time for this. And I didn't necessarily want to make the time. And that is not me, Matthew. Like that, I'm not somebody who ever thinks or feels about a friend that like, I don't have time for you. And I don't want that feeling and I don't like that feeling, but I feel like that is an area where my balance has shifted in a way that it never has before, that my marriage is rock solid, my business is living up to the potential that I want it to live in, and I'm helping people and I'm taking care of people with their depression and their struggles, and suddenly I have these friends, and it's not just one time. I could forgive myself for one isolated incident. This has come up a couple of times over, I'd probably say, the start of the year when I really started dreaming bigger for myself professionally, is that I haven't made the time for my friendships that I really want to make. And I don't always feel like I know how to make the time, because something's got to give. And at the end of the day, I think I end up choosing either my alone time, my marriage time, or my business time. And I really worry that I'm hurting my friends.
Oh, that's real. That's real. So, I mean, we're almost 8 months as we're talking right now, we're in August. So almost 9 months, into the year. And you said you've been experiencing this since the beginning of the year. So do you see like the place you hold for your friends and the expectations dropping a little bit to counterbalance the time and energy you've been putting into your relationship with your husband, which now you guys are going out and doing more things, and your job, your career, which something you're building? Like, do you see it counterbalancing, or how do you see yourself addressing the situation?
The first step, and it was so funny, is when it first happens, you sort of say to somebody, "Oh, I know we haven't gotten together in a while. I'm so sorry." And you get the immediate, "Oh, it's okay. I understand." Like, you're finally able to go out and do things, and you feel like you've been given a pass.
Yep.
I don't think I knew at the first time I said it that was bothering me then, that I didn't want to be the person who says, "I'm so sorry. I can't make time." So what is starting to shift, and it's only, I'd say, really only since like the past week or so, Matthew, like I'm just getting on this now, is changing my expectations for what time with my friends looks like. That it's okay if it's just a phone call, but that I'm not going to wait for someday. I'm going to schedule it. My sister and I, we both have August birthdays, and we always do, instead of presents for each other, we spend a day together. And we texted just today about like, okay, when is girls' day? And my instinct was, oh, well, your life's really crazy right now. Let's not schedule it. And she sort of said, if we don't schedule it, it doesn't happen. And it was like a light bulb moment that's what I have to do with my friends. Because if it's on my schedule professionally, it happens. So if I want more time with my friends, I can't rely on making time. I have to schedule it. And there's this in the leadership world, there's some talk too about like you schedule your priorities.
Yeah.
You don't prioritize your schedule.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. Professionally, I've nailed it. I schedule the articles I want to write. I schedule my coaching sessions I want to do. I schedule interviews like this with you, but I haven't put my girlfriend on a schedule in a really long time. Well, now they're starting to get added to my schedule, and I don't think I'm going to be right with myself or right in the relationships until I've sincerely apologized for not being available. But I think that I'll be doing better by the end of the year.
So it sounds like you're doing a couple of things. You said owning the fact that you haven't made them as a priority like they were in the past. And then you got into some of the effective things that you were doing in your business that were working. You started to implement them in the friendships as well with the scheduling. I like that.
And I think that's the way a lot of people can learn how to manage life challenges, that if you're struggling personally, more often than not, you have a professional skill you can lean on that translates. And the same thing in business is that if you know I was talking to somebody the other day he's a manager, and he was telling me about this over anxious employee. And I said, well, you have a kid. Have you ever had a kid wake up in the middle of the night scared to go back to sleep? And he's like, yeah, that's my life right now. And I said, well, what do you do? And we walked through it, that he lowers his voice. He uses shorter sentences. He says more encouraging statements. I said, that's the same thing you can do with your nervous employee, because at some point in time, you're still telling your kid, hey, kid, you got to get back to bed.
Yeah.
You're still having accountability, but you're also offering the nurturance. And that's how I walked him through it.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. Because there are a lot of people out there listening who have achieved some sort of success. Like they've put a certain set of skills to work in an area like career, and it's worked out in their favor, but then they wonder why other areas haven't worked. And it's like, well, you've excelled at your career. You've been able to communicate with your team, so you can do it. Now it's just doing that with, your family and your kids, or those relationships that you feel are suffering. So being able to translate all of those skills, I think is great.
I call it tuning into capability, that if you can tune into what you're capable of, suddenly you're able to do it.
Oh, I like that. Tuning into capability. Very cool. Well, Heather, this has been a really fun, full conversation. I mean, we packed a lot in just under an hour. And again, I appreciate you extending it a little bit. This has been great.
Oh, good. I enjoy talking about this stuff, and I am so grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you and get to know you as well. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, as we come to a close, I do want to give you the ability to do two things. I want you to leave us with a takeaway, just something that we can walk away from your story, your experience. We can put in our back pocket, some sort of tool. And then I also want you to let people know how they can connect with you, how they can get in touch with you, and learn more about you. So those two things.
Sure. The first thing that I would want to tell people is that when you're trying to decide what it is that's actually going to make you happy, the tip here is to stop it. Like, you have to start ignoring the critic that says, but you haven't gone to school yet, but what will so-and-so think? And do you really think you can do that? Because if you start at the obstacles of all of the things that are going to get in the way of making you happy, you never get there. You never figure out what actually is going to make you happy. You've stopped at the obstacles. So what I always teach people is get really clear on what it is you want, no matter how big, bold, brave, scary, challenging it is. And then we'll move to the how. Then we break it down to how do you solve the obstacles? How do you get the money? How do you find the time? How do you have the conversation? How do you learn what you need to know? But if you don't get really clear on what it is your dream is and get comfortable saying it out loud, you just never get there. And if people want to have that conversation with me, they can find me easily at choosetohaveitall.com. All my information, all my links to social media, my blogs, my articles, the freebies that are attached to the articles, they're all there.
Awesome. I will have links to your website in the show notes, and I love that takeaway. The what and then the how. I absolutely love that. Heather, this has been fantastic, and
it's lighting me up. I'm so excited. This has been a fantastic conversation. I loved it. Loved it.
Very cool. I have one final question for you, Heather. Question is,
sure.
Do you have it all?
I think I do. Once I figure out that thing with the friends, I'm not going to be right with me until I figure out the balance with the friends. But other than that, I am well on my way. I feel really good about where it's at. I just have some conversations with friends I need to have first.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Heather, thank you so much for coming on the show with me, for being real, being transparent, downloading and dropping your genius. I really, really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been fantastic.
Two quick things before you leave. First, did you know that the Having It All podcast is a part of the Fireside Network? Yep, we are one of the esteemed shows that calls Fireside Network home. That means if you ever want to listen to a show outside of iTunes or Stitcher or whatever your favorite podcasting app is, all you need to do is visit firesidenetwork.com and under shows, select Having It All. From there, you can access all the episodes, see the show notes, learn about my guests, and more. Second, I am very excited to announce that my brand new website is live. visit MatthewBivens.com and you can learn more about me, get plugged into an accountability group, and pick up some free content like the Abundance Benchmark. I am all about helping you not only identify what your ideal life looks like, but also helping you on your journey towards it. I want you to experience more abundance and love in your life. So, again, you can find out more information about all of that great stuff at MatthewBivens.com. Thank you once more for listening to the show, and here is to you having it all.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.